Paper 1, Question 3, the structure question, 1984. Lesson objectives: to hear the first 4 paragraphs of 1984 by George Orwell, to learn some structural techniques, to hear a model question 3 answer, and to write a question 3 answer. Some vocabulary that you'll need to look up. Vile means unpleasant. Propaganda is biased facts promoted by biased organisations. Pig iron is a raw industrial iron product. Meagre means insufficient or poor. Sanguine is rosy-cheeked. And bluebottle is a fly that feeds on animal waste. Did you know that 1984 is the source of the titles of 2 television programmes? The 2 programmes are Big Brother and Room 101. And did you know that 1984 has frequently been banned? It's been on the banned list from governments who don't like its message. So let's find out more about its message. Question 3. You now need to think about the whole of the source. The text is from the start of a novel. How has the writer structured the text to interest you as a reader? You could write about what the writer does to create an atmosphere at the beginning of the text, how and why the writer changes the focus as the extract develops, and any other structural features that interest you. 8 marks. If you Google YouTube 1984 modern trailer, you will come across the best trailer for the film, which explains a lot about the society and the problems that Winston faces. I've also included the URL and also the tiny URL if you wish to type that in. The opening. The opening sentence in the structure of any text is very important because it needs to immediately capture the interest of the reader. It needs to have impact. It needs to have a narrative hook. The first sentence runs as follows. It was a bright, cold day in April, and the clocks were striking 13. What's the effect created by these 2 clauses? Why do you think the writers created the contrast? The effect of the 2 clauses is that they contrast with each other. One is expected and the other is unexpected. After a normal scene is set, the reader is confused by the narrative hook of a clock striking 13. This is the full first paragraph. It was a bright, cold day in April and the clocks were striking 13. Winston Smith, his chin nuzzled into his breast in an effort to escape the vile wind, slipped quickly through the glass doors of Victory Mansions, though not quickly enough to prevent a swirl of gritty dust from entering along with him. What does a writer focus on here? What do the other bold phrases do in the text? The text starts focused on Winston. The adjectives vile and gritty foreshadow a troublesome, unpleasant and possibly sinister environment. How does the writer structure the opening of the chapter to engage the reader? Your answer should be built around these words and phrases. At first, the author then introduces, then at this point, zooming in and zooming out. The author moves gradually from to, the author focuses, contrasts, goes back to, juxtaposes, narrows down, uses a wide view, shifts away from, shifts the focus to, and finally. When you answer the question on structure, ask yourself, how has the author introduced me to this world? Your answer should explain the route the author takes that leads you through the events. Beware of simply retelling the story. Your answer should focus on how the writer structures the writing rather than on just what happens. Let's have a go at putting our ideas into words. The first clause encourages the reader to believe that it's going to be an ordinary day. However, the second clause in the sentence juxtaposes this with the clocks were striking 13, because we know that clocks only go up to 12, creating intrigue in the reader. The number 13 connotes negativity, as it's seen as a bad omen in Western culture, which could foreshadow that there is something not quite right. And the puzzling hook engages the reader as they want to find out what type of world this is set in. Let's move on to the second paragraph. The hallway smelt of boiled cabbage and old rag mats. At one end of it, a coloured poster too large for indoor display had been tacked to the wall. It depicted simply an enormous face, more than a metre wide, the face of a man of about 45 with a heavy black moustache and ruggedly handsome features. Winston made for the stairs. It was no use trying the lift. Even at the best of times it was seldom working, and at present the electric current was cut off during daylight hours. It was part of the economy drive in preparation for Hate Week. The flat was 7 flights up, and Winston, who was 39 and had a varicose ulcer above his right ankle, went slowly, resting several times on the way. On each landing, opposite the lift shaft, the poster with the enormous face gazed down from the wall. It was one of those pictures which are so contrived that the eyes follow you about when you move. "Big Brother is watching you," the caption beneath it ran. What does the writer focus on, and what can we infer? The writer focuses on the hallway, the repeated poster, the poor facilities, Winston's health, and Hate Week. What can we infer? The government care about control and propaganda, but not really people's welfare. Inside the flat, a fruity voice was reading out a list of figures, which had something to do with the production of pig iron. The voice came from an oblong metal plaque, like a dulled mirror, which formed part of the surface of the right-hand wall. Winston turned a switch, and the voice sank somewhat, though the words were still distinguishable. The instrument, the telescreen it was called, could be dimmed, but there was no way of shutting it off completely. He moved over to the window, a smallish, frail figure, the meagreness of his body merely emphasised by the blue overalls which were a uniform of the party. His hair was very fair, his face naturally sanguine, his skin roughened by coarse soap and blunt razor blades and the cold of the winter that had just ended. Where is the focus here? What issues does the writer focus on? Why does the writer do this, and what can we infer? The focus here is inside the flat. The writer focuses on the telescreen and its propaganda, and Winston's health and the hardship of his life. The writer does this because there's a powerful contrast between the considerable resources used for controlling people compared with how little the state cares for them. Here is the last paragraph. Outside, even through the shut window pane, the world looked cold. Down in the street, little eddies of wind were whirling dust and torn paper into spirals. And though the sun was shining and the sky harsh blue, there seemed to be no colour in anything except the posters that were plastered everywhere. The black mustachioed face gazed down from every commanding corner. There was one on the house front immediately opposite. "Big Brother is watching you," the caption said, while the dark eyes looked deep into Winston's own. Down at street level, another poster, torn at one corner, flapped fitfully in the wind, alternately covering and uncovering the single word, Ingsoc. In the far distance, a helicopter skimmed down between the roofs, hovered for an instant, like a blue bottle, and darted away again with a curving flight. It was the police patrol, snooping into people's windows. The patrols did not matter, however. Only the thought police mattered. Where does the writer shift the focus to? And why might the window be a structural feature? What does the description of the poster imply? And what effect does the description of the police patrol have? And lastly, what is the effect of the repetition in the last 2 sentences? The writer shifts the focus back outside, and the window is a structural feature because it takes us back to where we started outside. This is a circular structure. The description of the poster implies total control of your mind, and the effect of the description of the police control is unsettling and repulsive, but it's not as bad as the reason for the repetition in the last two sentences, the thought police, which is alarming and shocking. Here are some possible sentence starters for this answer. At the beginning of the extract, the writer focuses the reader's attention on, and the impact of this is. In the second paragraph, the focus shifts to, the impact of this is. Structure is initially used to. The impact of the complex sentence is. The opening line is structurally interesting because. The contrast created between. The continued shift in focus allows the audience to. The climax of the piece is, and the impact of this is. The writer has foreshadowed the idea of. The narrative voice is significant because. The circular structure, the third or first person narration, creates a sense of. How has the writer structured the text to interest you as the reader? Here's a model answer. The writer foreshadows a darker future through the use of the powerful adjectives vile and gritty, along with the juxtaposition of bright cold day in April and the clocks were striking 13. This is unusual because standard clocks only go to 12. 13 also has negative cultural connotations, which both make the reader feel uneasy, and it makes them intrigued and questioning of the nature of the society about which they are reading. The writer shifts focus from just outside the entrance to the building to the internal hallway, then to the stairs, the flat, and finally out of the window. As the journey progresses, the writer details the state of the buildings, but also juxtaposes the intimidating posters, "Big Brother is watching you," with Winston's weakness, the ulcer above his right ankle, which slows him down on the stairs. In paragraph 3, the telescreen is spouting propaganda, which cannot be turned off, which shocks the reader into wondering how intrusive the government is going to be. As the journey progresses out of the window, this only gets worse, with the shocking activities of the police, and even worse, the fact that the thought police were all that really mattered. This leaves the reader wondering what could possibly be worse. Before we finish, which language technique are these three things? Ignorance is strength, war is peace, freedom is slavery. They are paradoxes, and they are important phrases in the story of 1984.